Today's video will be about the Model Context Protocol and why I believe that it's the most overhyped and at the same time misunderstood technology that is currently around. If you are in the AI space, you can't have missed the MCP, because just look at this Google Trends chart. Like it looks more like the Bitcoin price chart, at least before this crash right here. But if I would have any YouTube video or I would develop any technology and the Google Trends chart looked like this, I knew that I was at least generating some hype. Also, when you look online, you see a lot of these posts saying MCP is way bigger than most people think, and people are already thinking that it's big, so even more big. But you can clearly see people are mind blown with MCP. Once again, someone tested MCP and he's mind blown. GenAI frameworks like Llama Index are turning agents into MCP servers. People are claiming it can make you a 100, not only a 10x, but a 100x engineer. That is the USB-C of AI tools. That is the hottest thing under the sun, and a very powerful way and standardized way for LLMs and AI applications to connect with tools. So if you read all these posts, you're probably thinking like, this has got to be one of the greatest inventions of the last decade. And yeah, even if you look at the model providers themselves, you see that this holy trinity of LLM providers is going all in on MCP. OpenAI has integrated MCP servers in their SDK. Google in their Google I/O said that Gemini SDK is now compatible with MCP tools. And of course, Anthropic was the one who introduced MCP and is continuously making videos about it. So yeah, to say that people are getting hyped about MCP would be an understatement. But yeah, this was me like 2 weeks ago. People were talking about MCP, that Microsoft was implementing it, that it was making you a 10x engineer, and here I was like someone who implemented AI agents as his main job, and even after his hours spent time researching the newest things in AI. I'm coding like neural networks from scratch in C++, so I'm very interested in AI, and I didn't even know what MCP was. And reading all these posts, I was thinking like, damn, I'm becoming really obsolete. There is this new way to build agents, and I'm still building agents in the old way, and everything that I'm doing is incorrect. So of course, being the good engineer that I am, instead of going to the official documentation, I decided, well, let's just watch some YouTube videos about what MCP is. And in these YouTube videos, you see that MCP is claimed to be a universal translator that saves 90% of your manual AI work, that it's the best way to interact with APIs and databases. Even that function calling is now obsolete thanks to MCP, that it really is this universal translator which makes connecting with different services seamless. So I was thinking like, do I no longer have to call APIs? How is this even possible to connect to services without APIs? So yeah, all of this just made me even more confused about what MCP is, and it seemed like something that could basically do everything. But after implementing my own MCP server and client from scratch, I realized that either these people don't really understand what problem MCP is trying to solve, or they lack the technical knowledge to really explain clearly what it's trying to do. Because I think maybe for some more non-technical people who don't implement these things for a living, that these explanations are fine. But to me, it just made me way more confused. And even when I started looking at the official tutorial, it didn't immediately clear things up, because just look at the first words you read when you open this, that MCP is like a USB-C port for AI applications, a standardized way to connect your AI to different tools, So I was thinking like, is this a replacement for function calling? What the hell, an USB-C port for AI applications? And here it says like it provides context to LLM. So is it like a reg pattern or something? Then when you read the Y MCP, you say it says like that you have some pre-built integrations that your LLM can plug into. So I was thinking like, okay, but now I'm just calling the APIs for the services. So how is this going to become even more easy? That it offered me the flexibility to switch between LLM providers. Well, in the assistants I implement them in such a way that I could already do this. So I didn't understand this. And that it was also the best way to secure your data. But like, the APIs I'm calling, they are already secured with OAuth, and if you're not doing this, yeah, you're probably doing something wrong security-wise. So I don't know how MCP can make my applications even more secure. So before I try to explain what people often misunderstand, let me just try to explain what MCP is. Let's first just look at the general architecture. And you see we have both a client and a server. And the client is things like the Claude Desktop app. It can be an IDE, and if you're developing an assistant or an agent yourself, your assistant or agent is the client. And you also have this MCP server, and this is a different process on your PC. It says like your computer, and this will be responsible for actually implementing the tools and also providing it exposes an endpoint you can use to fetch a description of all the tools that the server offers. So yeah, one of the first things your client will do is go through the list of all MCP servers that are connected and fetch a description of all the tools they offer. And then the MCP servers themselves, like is also drawn here, will actually do the actual tool call or the API call, which can either be a local operation, for example, manipulating the local file system, or can call an web API like usual. So in short, and I think this is very clear, the client is your assistant and the server allows first off to query tool definitions and calls the actual APIs, which can be either remotely or locally. And also at the moment, most of these MCP servers run locally on your PC, but there is some work being done for them being remote. And this is going to be one of the issues that I mainly have with MCP, but that's for later. So let's first off try to explain maybe like why would I use MCP? And I think to explain that, I first need to explain how agents are implemented without using MCP. So without MCP, what, for example, let's say you have a agent or assistant which is capable of interacting with Google Drive, for example, deleting documents, creating new ones, fetching documents, just come up with some operations you want to do in Google Drive. And let's say that you created an agent to interact with it. So the first thing you need to do, of course, is fetch the list of all the APIs that the Google Drive API offers and basically keep track of it in your assistant. So you hard code it at build time basically. And then when a message comes in, like I want to get a document titled MCP thoughts, it gets forwarded from the front end to your assistant. And your assistant, it will basically use a LLM, and LLM, what does it get as input? It gets the message the user asked and also a JSON description of all the tools that are available. And then the job of the LLM is not to actually call a function or something like that, but it should just predict which function that we should call. And because here the function has a title, get document, and also a description, retrieve the document from the user's Google Drive, it's probably very obvious that the user would want to call this API. So that's also what the Gemini API will then predict, that you need to call the function getDocument. And this is just the normal tool calling API flow. If you've implemented any agent, you know what this is. So you then get this JSON back from the Gemini API, you parse it into into the method that you need to call on the Google Drive API. You call the method on the Google Drive API, which the LLM predicted, you get the document back, and you return the document to the user. But let's now look at how such an agent would work in an MCP flow. Well, in an MCP flow, what you're basically doing is, first off, you have a config file. So this represents the config file right here. And the agent will read this config file, and this config file contains the URLs of all the MCP servers that your agent has access to. And then the first thing what happens when you boot up your agent is it will call something like get tools on all the MCP servers that are connected, and all the MCP servers will return the tools that they offer. So this is already the biggest difference between the usual flow and the MCP flow. In the MCP flow, we can dynamically ingest new servers by editing a config file, and we are also dynamically discovering the tools that the MCP server offers. And here we are just at design time. We hard code basically all the APIs that our assistant can call, because, for example, if we are creating a Google Drive agent, we know at design time which APIs our assistant would need to call, so we actually already stored them somewhere. But here we can dynamically discover new tools. And then when we have discovered these tools, what then happens is a message arrives from our front end, once again the same. And once again, the same thing happened. We are just going to do a tool call like usual. We are just going to call our LLM API, and we are once again going to pass the JSON description of all the tools, give it to the LLM, and the LLM will then say, well, you should call the getDocument API. So we can already rule out that MCP is not a replacement for tool calls. Tool calls still happens. The only thing that is different is that we dynamically discovered these tools right here. And also note that we know which API to call. We are not going to call the Google Drive API directly like before, but we are instead going to send a message to our MCP server that we would like to call the getDocument tool with the following parameters, and then this tool will actually implement the actual API call, and the MCP server will interact with the Google Drive API. It will fetch the document for us, and then the server will pass the document back to our assistant and the assistant to the front end. So I think this, if you are a technical person, this will already explain a lot. So the two main differences are, first off, we are discovering tools dynamically. And the second difference is, we have to not directly call the API, but we have to go through this MCP server to call the API. But maybe things will become a bit more clear when we dive into the actual code, because I implemented a client and server from scratch, and this will make things, I think, maybe a bit more clear. So, okay, what do we have right here? Here we have an implementation of the MCP clients, and here we have an MCP server. Let's maybe look at the server first, because that's the easiest. And what the server does, this is from the official tutorial, because it offers some free API we can call. And what can it call? It can get the weather forecast given a certain latitude and longitude, and it can also get the weather alerts from a certain state in the US. And you're just implementing Python API calls like you would do, like you're just writing regular Python code. The only thing you're doing is you are tagging your methods that you want your assistant able to call with .MCP tool. So you write a decorator for it, and then you say MCP server run, and everything gets turned into an MCP server. So it's very easy. You just install some Python packages and you can very easily create MCP servers for yourself. And this is just regular Python code with some decorators added. So actually nothing interesting is happening here. And then you also have this MCP client, and this one is able to connect to the server. I said like that we should read MCP server from some kind of config file, but I've hard-coded it right here. So the thing you should realize is that with the Claude Desktop application that we are going to see a bit later, that this that there is actually being a config of MCP servers which you can edit, and that's then being read. But in this case, I just hard-coded the link to my MCP server. You can also just pass the MCP server from the command line, parse it from command line arguments. But the first thing we are going to do is specify to which servers to connect. And what it then does is whenever a user question comes in, what are we going to do is we are going to list all the tools of all the servers that were connected to our MCP client. I then convert these tools to what the Gemini API expects. And here, actually, all things down here are just regular tool calls. So the only thing really interesting about MCP happens here when we fetch the different tools. What are we doing here? We are passing the user query, and we are telling the Gemini API which tools it can call. And then from the response, we are basically parsing which tool the LLM has predicted that needs to be called. And then we call this tool. But all of this logic is also dependent on the Gemini API itself, which returns things as parts, and this is different from how the OpenAI API does it and how the Anthropic API does it. So I wouldn't pay that much attention to the specific code, but let's check it out. So you can just run the server, and you see MCP client started and my MCP server is discovered, so these things become available. So let's say what are the weather alerts in California? And you will see that Gemini requested a tool call. Let's go back above. Gemini requested a tool call with the method to call the method get alerts with these arguments: state California, and it called our MCP server, which in its turn called this URL, and we got some weather alerts back for California. So it's as easy as that. Okay, so having learned all of this, what problem does MCP actually solve? Well, the only problem it really solves is that it allows users to add tools at runtime. And currently these tools are going to be added locally, so you have to run servers from them. But allowing users to add tools locally is mainly beneficial if you are trying to create an app, like for example the Claude Desktop app, or for example Cursor is also an MCP client, and it allows applications like this to discover new MCP servers and tools you run locally, for example a Stripe MCP server or a Notion or Slack MCP server, so that the tools don't have to be hard-coded when you are building something like Cursor, but that Cursor itself can discover new tools, similar I think to when you would like mod a game or something like that. So note that we know all of this. Like, we can also look at some common claims, like, is MCP a universal translator? Well, Not really, like it just allows you to discover tools at runtime. APIs still need to be called, so I wouldn't say it's a universal translator. Is it a replacement for function calling? Definitely not. Function calls still happen. Is it the best way to talk to external services? Well, yeah, it mainly depends. Are you developing something like Claude where you want your users to add new tools at runtime? Then yeah, maybe, and else, yeah, also definitely not. So once again, does your agent that you're developing need to use MCP? Do you know the tool call APIs at build time, which is going to be the case for I think almost any assistant you are going to develop? No, you don't need to use MCP. And else, if you're developing something like Claude Code, possibly. And what I often see on the internet is that people are just diving headfirst into MCP and only later finding out like, okay, why do I have to call a separate server when I could just call the API directly? And that's, yeah, of course, like why would you want to run an entire server just to host your tools and do the API calls? In a real application, there are maybe like 10 different APIs that you want to call. So why would I want to run 10 different MCP servers when I can just make my agent call the API directly, and I only have to host the agent and not 10 different servers? So I think some people are just diving in head first, and then afterwards, after they have built something, realize, wait, this isn't correct. But maybe I'm thinking too much about it from a software or AI agent developer perspective. Maybe it really is the case for users that like take your average programmer. If you give him Claude Desktop plus MCP, does he become a 10x engineer like people claim? Well, at the moment, I still think there are a lot of problems with MCP. First off, it really feels like a self-hosted version of the internet. Like, let's say this box is my desktop. To be able to allow Claude Desktop to interact, for example, with my Stripe or my Notion, I have to spin up all these MCP servers locally on my PC. And if you want to use a lot of different tools, you have to spin up maybe like 10 different Docker containers on your PC, which take up quite a bit of RAM. It really feels like if I was using Google Chrome and to visit Facebook, I had to first off spin up the web server of Facebook, and then I want to visit Google Drive, so I have to spin up the web server of Google Drive. Well, this would be a horrible user experience to have to use the web in such a way that you would also need to run all the web servers yourself. There are some improvements, I think, on the way regarding this, and that some remote MCP servers will be offered. But at the moment, for the most part, you have to spin up these servers locally. Also, maybe it would be a bit less of a hassle if the installation process was a bit easier. For example, let's take a look at what needs to happen when I want to add an MCP server to Claude. So I boot up Claude Desktop, and what you then need to do is go to Settings, Developer. Then you need to click on Add Config. You need to edit this JSON file, for example, with VS Code. And then you need to specify here which MCP servers you want to connect to. You need to specify the terminal command and the location. And also, for example, sometimes you can use the just the command itself, but sometimes, for example, locally, like when I was just running my MCP server with the terminal, I could just call UV and then the directory. But for some reason with the Claude MCP, I have to add the entire path to my UV installation. And then after you edit this config file, you can then restart Claude Desktop. So you have to quit it and then open it again. And then these tools will appear. And now I can do something like write a poem to my desktop, which will then call the local yeah, I don't know what's called, a local directory tool. So let's see if it can find this. Hopefully the demo doesn't fail. Okay, it misunderstood that. It's just wrote a poem about a desktop. Maybe I need to specify like write a poem and save it to my desktop. So yeah, even if you connect these tools, there's no guarantee that it finds it. But now you can see it tries to connect to my desktop. So I will say allow it to list the directories. Perfect, I can save it to your desktop. It will first write the poem. It specifies the request it wants to offer. So I say allow once. Okay, it says it has saved it. Let's see, morning light poem. And indeed, some poem has been written to my desktop. And I can understand that this, yeah, it feels quite impressive that Claude can do this. But still, it's quite a hassle to install things. And when you look at some other MCP servers, let's say you want to have your own Notion MCP server, well, to set it up, you first have to set some integrations within Notion itself. You have to click on new integration, add a workspace. Then you need to enable some settings here that the MCP server can read it. Then you need to go here and edit some access. Then you need to select the pages it can access. Then you need to go here with these triple dots. Look for some integrations, and then you need to add it to your MCP config, and then you need to run the Docker container of the Notion server. I think like for non-technical people this is simply not possible, and even I think it's quite a hassle to set up. And also when I think about it, like I don't really understand why I would want to use the Notion MPC server, so MCP server. So I also went looking online and tried to find posts where people were using MCP actually in a productive way, and I mainly came around posts of people just asking about what other people were doing what other people were using MCP for, and they said like I haven't found a killer use case for it, which honestly amazed me a bit by seeing that so many people are posting hype, and then when people ask how are you using this or what should I do to get productive, yeah, not that many answers were found. And also when I look at it myself, like at which MCP servers you can connect with Cursor, I would say like which MCP server do I want to have to make me more productive. And looking at this, I can honestly, I don't know which MCP server that I would even hook up with Cursor. Like why would I want to inspect my Google Ads with Cursor? Also like why would I want the agent to spin up services? These should just be, the agent should just like generate a Docker file or something for me. I don't want them to spin things up in a non-reproducible way. So just going through this list, like Claude, yeah, all of these things, I was just thinking like, why would I want my agents to connect to these? So yeah, also online, I didn't find at the moment any compelling use case to use it with Cursor. And also when you look at the more general directory for things you can hook up to Claude Desktop, you see things like yeah, like PayPal and stuff. But still, like why would I go through the hassle of having to spin this up locally on my PC, spin up a Docker image, do the integration just to be able to query my finances through chat when I can just go through to the PayPal website myself to get exactly the same? Why would I want to query my League of Legends statistics? I know this all sounds pretty cool as a technical use case, but yeah, at least so far I haven't found any cool MCP servers that I want to use daily. So definitely, if you know some, leave some comments down below. But still, I don't think all hope is lost, and still it would seem cool if I could just write something to Claude, like I'm going on a vacation, and that it could automatically, for example, book me a hotel, that it could like book some parking, find the right route to the hotel, and just present this to me in a report and say, I've booked this, you need to go here, you should see this. So I definitely see tools as a very big use case for LLMs in the future, but at the moment the current implementation, or at least the current state of MCP, isn't convincing me. And I think at least these things need to happen before it really takes off. First off, I don't want to run these things locally and have to manually connect them individually. Either the installation process needs to be very easy, but probably I would want it that it is more like a web server, and that you have a replacement for Google or something, but then for MCP servers, and that these agents can automatically discover MCP servers, that I can just use the ChatGPT through the web API, and that it can automatically discover the MCP servers for things that I'm asking about. So yeah, that no manual integration is necessary. A very good authentication and easy authentication flow needs to be set up, because most useful things require something for authentication, and if this is a hassle, then all the rest doesn't even matter. I want many remote MCP servers, so I don't want to spin up anything locally, and that it becomes like a web server. But like, even then, I'm thinking like, why would I go through the hassle of using Claude Desktop plus MCP plus Notion if I want to use AI into Notion, when almost any service nowadays already has an AI integration, and these AI integrations are tested. They are perfectly integrated within the UI of the application. It uses the right model. Like I said, it has been tested out that it can correctly call all the APIs. So I'm at the moment leaning a bit towards that. That I would more likely want to use products that have deep AI integrated within them, and use the AI that they offer, rather than accessing everything to a Claude or ChatGPT front end. Of course, Anthropic and OpenAI would want Claude and the OpenAI desktop app to become the front end to everything. So that's why they are also very heavily investing in MCP. But honestly, at the moment, I'm still more into this camp. Maybe I will change if MCP becomes a lot more user friendly. Then I would come to this camp. But at the moment, so I think I hope this explains MCP more clearly to you, that if you're developing agents, that you probably don't need to use MCP, that it's at the moment really hyped, but that there, at least to me, aren't that many good MCP servers and use cases yet, and that almost every service nowadays has deep AI integration. So I don't know if this MCP thing will really take off. But anyways, I'm definitely going to stay up to date with MCP now that I know what it means. Maybe even try to experiment more with it and see if I can code something useful for the Claude Desktop app, because I think it's very cool that now indeed you can hook up things to Claude Desktop and you don't have to pay for any tokens to test out your tools. But anyways, enough rambling. If you sticked around up until this point, I hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely consider checking out my other videos if you like AI, and definitely subscribe, and I see you in the next one.